Let me tell you something that happened recently that I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. Someone left a comment on one of my videos, and I get a lot of comments, trust me, I read them all. Sometimes at midnight when I probably should be sleeping, but this one stopped me cold. They wrote, "I asked AI if I retire and plan to live 40 years after that, and it said I will need $3.3 million if I plan to spend $100,000 a year." And I just sat there staring at my screen. Not because the math was wrong exactly, but because of what that number does to a person, what it does to a dream, what it does to a woman. And yes, I'm going to talk about women specifically today because this hits us differently, who is sitting at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, running the numbers on her future, trying to figure out whether financial freedom is even possible for her. And then a machine tells her she needs $3.3 million. And she closes the laptop, and she goes to bed thinking the dream is dead. That is the moment I want to talk about, because I think we can do better. I know we can do better. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how. Hey everyone, I'm Erin, welcome back. And I want you to know before we dive in, I actually reached out to Bill Bengen, the man who created the 4% rule, the foundational framework of modern retirement planning, and I asked him point blank, what is a sustainable withdrawal rate if we extend retirement to 40 years? He got back to me. And spoiler, he doesn't agree with AI either. So stay with me because this gets good. First, let's talk about what AI actually did here. My read is that AI took a simple withdrawal rate, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3%, and applied it straight to a portfolio. And on its face, that sounds responsible, sounds conservative, sounds smart. It's basically the logic of the 4% rule, just stretched from 30 years to 40 years. You stretch the time horizon, you lower the withdrawal rate, you push the portfolio requirement up. Fine, logical, mathematically defensible. But here's what's missing, your actual life. Financial media loves a tidy single number answer. It makes for clean headlines. You need $3.3 million to retire on $100,000 a year. Copy, paste, done. And I understand why. It's simple. It travels. But retirement planning that is simple to explain is rarely planning that serves you well in real life. What if I told you that the same $100,000 a year retirement, the exact same lifestyle, the exact same spending, the same travel, the same comfort, might be achievable with significantly less? What if the number isn't $3.3 million, but closer to $1.7 million? What would that mean for you? What doors would that open? That's what I want to explore. Because I genuinely believe that too many people are walking away from the possibility of early retirement because of a number that doesn't account for the full picture of their financial life. Who are we planning for? Let's get specific, because specificity is where good planning lives. For this scenario, I'm using age 50 as our retirement date. That means we're planning for a 40-year retirement, running from age 50 to age 90. Now, should you plan even longer if your family history suggests it? Absolutely. I'll say that again. Plan for your own situation, your own health, your own family history, always. But let's talk about the data for a moment, because I think it matters. For a man who is 50 years old today in the United States, there is roughly a 35 to 40% chance that he lives to see his 90th birthday. For a woman, that number climbs to about 50%. So we're not talking about some extreme edge case. A 40-year retirement is not a fantasy. For many of us, especially the women watching this, it is genuinely the mathematical reality we need to be planning for. And here's the other piece. Our hypothetical retiree didn't stumble into this situation. They were a high earner. They were a disciplined, aggressive saver. You don't accidentally accumulate a 7-figure portfolio at age 50. It is the result of decisions, sacrifices, and a long game played with patience and purpose. That's who we're talking about today. Social Security, the variable that AI ignored. Before we build a single portfolio bucket, we need to talk about Social Security, because this is where the $3.3 million figure starts to fall apart. Social Security is not a minor footnote. It is a real income stream. It has built-in inflation protection, and for our planning purposes, It fundamentally changes how much portfolio we actually need, but only if you include it in the plan. Here's the landscape as of 2026. If you claim at 62, early retirement, the maximum monthly benefit is just under $3,000. Claim at full retirement age, 67, and that climbs to $4,152 a month. Wait until 70, and you're looking at about $5,200 a month. Now, for our retiree who is a high earner, remember, I'm going to assign them a Social Security benefit of $2,500 a month or $30,000 a year, claiming at age 62. To qualify for that, you'd need average indexed earnings over your working life of roughly $121,000. And that doesn't mean you earned that every single year. That's your average. You may have started lower and climbed steadily, which is exactly how many careers unfold. Here's why this is so important. Once Social Security turns on at 62, our portfolio no longer needs to cover $100,000 a year. It only needs to cover $70,000. Social Security is doing $30,000 of the work every single year from that point forward. That's not a minor detail. That is a complete transformation of the problem, and AI didn't factor it in. Or if it didn't factor it in properly. And that omission is costing people their retirement dreams. All the numbers I'm using today are in today's dollars. Inflation is baked in because we're using real rates of return throughout. So you don't have to mentally adjust for it as we go. Building the buckets, a framework that honors real life. Here's where I want to have a real conversation with you, because this is where planning gets interesting. This is where it stops being a math problem and starts being a life strategy. Rather than one big lump sum and one withdrawal rate, I want to build this retirement in layers, what I call a bucket framework. Each bucket serves a different purpose, sits in different investments, and carries a different time horizon. And together, they create something that a single withdrawal rate simply cannot create: resilience. Bucket 1, the cash reserve. This is our foundation. 2 years of spending held in a high-yield savings account or money market fund. That's $200,000 at age 50, earning somewhere in the range of 1.5 to 2% real return. This isn't meant to grow, it's meant to be there. No matter what the market is doing, no matter what the headlines say, no matter how scary things look, this money is sitting there, calm and ready. Think of this as your I will never panic sell insurance policy. Because here's what I've seen over and over again in this industry. People make their worst financial decisions at exactly the wrong time. Market crashes, headlines screaming, portfolio down 30%, and they sell. They lock in the loss. They step out of the recovery. The cash bucket is the thing that lets you breathe when the world feels like it's on fire. Bucket 2, the conservative bridge portfolio. This is the engine of your early retirement. It covers the first 12 years and every single one of those $100,000 annual withdrawals from age 50 to 62. We're assuming a 3% real rate of return here. The present value you need at age 50 is approximately $995,000. Think of this less as a single conservative fund and more as a thoughtfully designed blend. High-quality bonds, short-duration treasuries, maybe some blue-chip equities or high dividend-paying stocks mixed in. The point is that you're not reaching for yield you can't afford to lose, but you're also not leaving all of this in a savings account. It's invested with the horizon it deserves, which is roughly a decade, and it's designed to be spent down intentionally. That's not a failure. That is the plan working exactly as designed. Bucket 3, the long-term growth portfolio. This is where the magic lives. This money is not touched for 12 full years. 12 years of compounding, completely undisturbed. We're assuming a 5% real rate of return here, which is a reasonable long-term expectation for an equity-heavy portfolio. The amount you need this bucket to reach by year 12 is approximately $946,000. Discounted back to age 50, The present value you need to put in today is approximately $527,000. After year 12, this bucket becomes your primary income source, covering $70,000 a year for 28 years, while Social Security covers the other $30,000. By the time you start drawing on it, it has had a full decade plus to grow. That is a profoundly different conversation than trying to sustain withdrawals from day one. The total? $1.7 million, not $3.3 million. Let's add it up. Cash reserve, $200,000. Conservative bridge, $995,000. Long-term growth, $527,000. Total needed at age 50, approximately $1.7 million. Compare that to the $3.3 million AI suggested. We are looking at a difference of $1.6 million. Let that sink in for a moment. 1.6 million. That is not a rounding error. That is a life-altering difference. Now, I want to be completely clear. I am not standing here telling you that saving $1.7 million by age 50 is easy. It is not. It requires real sacrifice. It requires real discipline. It requires making choices that your peers probably aren't making, passing on things that your peers probably aren't passing on, and playing a long game that sometimes feels lonely and uncertain. I respect the work it takes. I honor the sacrifice. But $1.7 million is a different goal than $3.3 million. It is a more humanly achievable goal. And for someone sitting at that kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, trying to figure out if early retirement is even possible, that difference might be everything. Why this structure works, beyond the math. Here's the part I love most, and I mean that. This genuinely lights me up, because there's a psychological dimension to the bucket approach that I think is just as important as the financial mechanics. When you have one big portfolio and one withdrawal rate, every market downturn is a full-blown crisis. Your entire financial future feels like it's swinging with the Dow. When the market drops 25% in 3 months, and sometimes it does, you are watching your retirement evaporate in real time. That is a brutal way to live, and it drives people to make terrible decisions. But when you have buckets, every dollar has a job. Your cash reserve is untouched and available. Your bridge portfolio covers you for the next decade. Your growth portfolio, yes, it's volatile in the short term, but you don't need it for 12 years. You can watch it ride the waves because you're not depending on it this year or next year or the year after that. This is how you stay invested when the world gets chaotic. Not through discipline alone, though discipline matters, but through structure. Structure that makes staying the course the rational, obvious choice, rather than a white-knuckle act of emotional willpower. Let's stress test this, because we should. I want to be honest with you about the 3% real return assumption on bucket 2. It's the number I'd scrutinize hardest if this were your actual plan and you were sitting across the table from me. 3% real over a conservative portfolio for a decade plus is plausible. It has happened. It can happen. But it is not guaranteed. There are absolutely stretches of time where a low-risk portfolio underperforms inflation. We've seen it. And planning as if best-case scenarios are guaranteed is planning that fails when reality shows up. So here's how I'd actually think about it. Run 3 scenarios. In your conservative case, use a 2% real return on bucket 2. This pushes your total portfolio requirement up, closer to $2 million, but it stress tests the plan against a rough environment. In your base case, you use 3%. That's your working plan. And in your optimistic case, maybe you use 4%, not as the number you count on, but as the number that shows you the best case ceiling. This is how you understand the range of your future, rather than placing all your bets on one straight line projection. Real life doesn't move in straight lines. It lurches, it surprises, it humbles you. A good plan accounts for that. Now, here's something genuinely exciting. Let's run the actual math on bucket 2. You start at 50 with $995,000. You're withdrawing $100,000 a year and earning 3% real. By the time you hit age 62, after 12 years of withdrawals, Bucket 2 still has approximately $273,000 in it. Bucket 3, meanwhile, has been compounding completely untouched for 12 years, and by then it's worth approximately $946,000. You roll that $273,000 from Bucket 2 right into Bucket 3, and suddenly your growth portfolio is sitting at roughly $1.2 million, just as Social Security kicks in and your annual portfolio draw drops to $70,000. That's not just good planning, that's a plan with momentum. The balance sheet at age 62. Let's look at the full picture at the moment Social Security turns on. Your cash reserve, that $200,000 you set aside at 50, has been there as your backstop. Maybe it got tapped a couple of times. Maybe it grew a little. Conservatively, let's call it $250,000 at age 62. At that point, I would rename that bucket. That is now your healthcare bucket, your long-term care bucket, your life happens bucket. Because at 62, the risks shift. You're not worrying as much about a bad sequence of returns. You're starting to think about what happens if your health changes. What happens if you or a spouse needs care? That $250,000 sitting separate and dedicated to those purposes is an enormous source of peace. Then your growth portfolio is sitting at approximately $1.2 million. Social Security is now covering $30,000 a year. Your portfolio draw is $70,000 a year. That's a withdrawal rate just under 5.5%, which in isolation might sound aggressive. But this is not in isolation. You have Social Security with built-in inflation adjustments running alongside it, and spending tends to shift as we age. You might be taking the big international trips at 62. By 75 or 80, the research consistently shows that spending tends to decline. That's not deprivation, that's life at different stages. The tax picture nobody talks about. I want to spend a moment on something that gets glossed over constantly because I think it matters enormously. A $100,000 income in retirement is not the same as a $100,000 salary during your working years, not even close. When you're working and earning $100,000, you're paying federal income tax, likely state income tax, Social Security payroll tax, and Medicare tax before a dollar ever lands in your bank account. That can easily be 25 to 35 cents on the dollar gone before you see it. When you're retired and drawing from a taxable brokerage account, you're drawing on cost basis, which is not taxable, and capital gains, which are taxable, but potentially at 0% or 15% depending on your income. You're not paying payroll taxes at all on that income. If you're drawing from a Roth account, you're pulling contributions that aren't taxed at all. And Social Security, not 100% of it is ever taxable. Depending on your income picture, only 50 to 85% of your benefit counts. The point is this: a retiree pulling $100,000 of income may have an after-tax take-home that's remarkably close to a worker earning $100,000, because the tax picture is completely different. So many people think they need to replace 100% of their salary in retirement. But once you strip out payroll taxes, retirement contributions, work-related expenses, commuting costs, many retirees discover they can maintain their exact lifestyle on considerably less gross income than they ever expected. And for those retiring early, at 50, before the magic door to penalty-free retirement accounts opens at 59 and a half, please plan your account structure carefully. A taxable brokerage account is a beautiful tool for early retirees because it has no age restrictions. A governmental 457B plan, if you're a teacher, firefighter, police officer, or other state and local government employee, allows distributions upon separation from service regardless of age. No 10% penalty. Roth contribution basis, Roth conversion ladders, the rule of 55. There are more bridges than people realize, but you have to plan for them before you need them, not after. What Bill Bengen said. I messaged him. the man who invented the 4% rule. I told him what we were modeling, a 40-year retirement, and I asked him, what does he consider a sustainable withdrawal rate for that time horizon? His answer, 4.36%. Which means, under his framework, ignoring everything we've built in this video, you would need approximately $2.3 million to support $100,000 a year in spending. Still not $3.3 million. Not even close to $3.3 million. And that's Bill Bengen, with his 4% rule being appropriately conservative without even accounting for Social Security. Once you layer in Social Security the way we have, once you give credit to the $30,000 a year that kicks in at 62 and reduces what your portfolio has to carry, the number gets even more manageable. I want to say something directly here. I am not telling you retirement planning is easy. I am not telling you that saving $1.7 or even $2 million is simple or quick or painless. But I am telling you that the ceiling is not $3.3 million. And I think it matters enormously that we say that clearly, because financial anxiety in this country, and especially among women, is already at crisis levels. We don't need AI adding fictional ceilings to an already difficult climb. Go into retirement debt-free, full stop. Last thing, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, if you are heading toward an early retirement, eliminate debt before you get there. All of it. Consumer debt, car loans, and if at all possible, the mortgage. Go in clean. I say this not just as a financial calculation, but as a quality of life principle. Because here's the thing about carrying debt into retirement. It takes a fixed cost and makes it non-negotiable. You can adjust your travel budget. You can scale back dining out. You can find flexibility in almost every category of spending, except a debt payment. That number is what it is every month, whether your portfolio is up or down, whether you're healthy or sick, whether the economy is booming or contracting. I live in the Midwest, and I'll tell you honestly, once our home is paid off, which we're on track for in the next couple of years, living on $100,000 a year is going to feel very comfortable. Very comfortable. That might not be true for everyone. If you're in a high cost of living city, if you have a large family, if your lifestyle reflects other choices, that's completely valid. But for many Americans, many households that are right now living on $100,000 or less while still paying a mortgage, going into retirement debt-free changes the entire equation. It reduces your risk, it increases your flexibility, and it dramatically increases your probability of success. If there is one tactical thing I would want every person planning an early retirement to hear today, it is this. Debt-free is a retirement strategy. Treat it like one. The real point, I started this video because of a comment, but I want to end it with something bigger. There is a version of retirement planning out there, the version that tells you that you need $3.3 million, that frames your financial future as a single massive mountain you may never be able to climb, that I believe is doing real harm. Not because the math is necessarily dishonest, but because it is incomplete, because it ignores Social Security, because it ignores the structure of how you actually deploy assets across time, because it treats retirement as one undifferentiated blob rather than a series of distinct phases with distinct needs. The bucket approach isn't just a strategy, it's a philosophy. It says, I will meet my future self where she actually is, in each season of her life, with the right resources at the right time. It says, I refuse to let worst-case scenario thinking crowd out every scenario. It says, I am going to plan like an adult who understands that life is dynamic, that spending shifts with age, that Social Security is real income, and that structure matters as much as the total number. And maybe most importantly, it says, I deserve to retire on my terms, at my timeline, with a plan built for my life, not a generic number generated by a machine that doesn't know me. So here's my question for you. If you're planning for a 40-year retirement, what does your structure look like? Would you use buckets? What would you do differently? What assumptions would you stress test? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. I post new videos every week, And if this one gave you something to think about, please like it. Please share it with someone who needs to hear that the dream is more possible than the algorithms want you to believe. I'll see you next week.